video to kind of continue with our ecology unit is on community ecology. And in specific, we're going to look at species interactions. So remember that a community is, in ecological terms, multiple populations of different species in an area. So before we talked about population ecology, which is just our groups of one species. So a population is just a group of a particular species. So if we have a group of rabbits that live in a particular area, that is a population of rabbits. In community ecology, now we're talking about many different populations composed of different species. So population of rabbits and grass and foxes, and all in the same area interacting. So the things that we talked about in population dynamics, how populations grow and change in our modeling, still hold true. However, they become much more complex because now we're talking about many different species all interacting with each other. So we are going to look at kind of 5 interspecific, so between different species. So 5 different interactions between different species that are the foundation of a community. So those are going to be competition, predation, herbivory, symbiosis, and facilitation. So we'll look at these 5 things here today to start to understand the foundations of community. Alright, the first we're going to look at is competition. And competition is really important because it is a central mechanism behind natural selection, behind evolution there. And so what you can do is you can think back to our just last topic when we were talking about population growth models, and one of the things that our logistic growth model was good at, or was better at than our exponential growth model, was realizing, that there's a carrying capacity and that competition for resources happen. There's not an unlimited supply of food or shelter or water or space in a defined area, and so competition needs to happen. And when members of different species are competing for those limited resources, we call it interspecific. And interspecific just means kind of between different species. So if there are, let's say, for example, 2 species that are competing over the same resource. So let's say that resource is food, and in particular it is the tree leaves, all right? One of the main principles of competition is if 2 species are in competition over a limited resource, that means this resource is scarce, there's not enough to feed both organisms, both populations. Both of these populations cannot coexist indefinitely. One species will inevitably outcompete or use the resource more efficiently and be able to get their fill, while the other organism goes hungry. So one of our organisms might be able to better gain access to the tree leaves, and then kind of there won't be enough left over with the other organism. This is what we call competitive exclusion. So what happens is over time, the species that is better at competing at getting those limited resources will be able to get enough for themselves and kind of leave one out without enough other species out that won't have enough of that resource. So they're kind of excluding them. As a result of this competitive exclusion, different species usually develop specific niches in a community because that limits competition. And so a niche is a specific set or a specific part of a community that an organism might live certain biotic factors and abiotic factors specific to that organism. So in that way, two similar species can coexist in a community if they have different enough niches. So for example, one of these leaf-eating organisms might specialize and only eat the leaves of one specific tree, and the other organism might only eat the leaves of a different specific tree. In that way, they limit competition, but they have a specific niche, a specific habitat within that environment where they live. So these slight niche variations, where both species use slightly different resources or the same resource during different time periods, is called resource partitioning. Resource partitioning. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about here next. First, we look at about how two species that compete over a given resource might evolve by natural selection to utilize to adapt to separate niches to limit that competition, and that can drive evolution. An example of resource partitioning you can find with these lizard species, and where they perch and where they live. So here's two different populations of the same lizard species. They have different subspecies, as you can see, but they're all part of the same main species denoted by this A. And they look very, very similar. However, they live in different parts of the same environment. So the resource they're competing over is space. And they've developed different niches to limit that competition. They've partitioned that resource of space. So some live in the shady branches. Some, like this guy, live on sunny surfaces like fence posts. Some live high in the tree. Some live really close to the ground. So they all utilize the same, like trees, the same type of shelter, but they utilize different parts of it, so they don't have to compete for space. That's an example of resource partitioning. So due to competition, a species' fundamental niche, so that's the niche that could potentially be occupied by that species if no other species was competing for that space. And that fundamental niche is often different from what's called the realized niche, or the niche that it actually occupies, the space it actually occupies because of competition. So, for example, we've got two different species of barnacles, kind of blue and a kind of brown. And the fundamental niche of this blue species, it could live anywhere from the bottom here up to kind of the middle of this hill. All right, so it likes, it needs to be at some, for most of the times, submerged by water. So even during low tide, it needs to have a decent enough amount of water here. The brown species can potentially has a fundamental niche of anywhere from low tide all the way up to the high tide line. Anywhere in here the brown species can live. Because they're competing for space, they end up partitioning this resource, or adapting to different niches. This brown species begins to only live at the very top of its fundamental niche because it is outside of the fundamental niche of this blue species. And in that way, the realized niches of the two species change. The realized niche of the brown species is only this small part at the top. That's where it actually is found to live, and it only lives there to limit competition, whereas the blue takes up the space below. So this is another example of resource partitioning, and how resource partitioning can divide fundamental niches into realized niches. Ecologists can also determine an organism's fundamental niche by studying all of the environments in which it is found, and then determining the effect of competition on that fundamental niche by removing a competitor. So we could figure out, if we stumble across this, we could find out what the fundamental niche of this brown species is by just taking all the blue ones out. And then kind of what's left, you would see that the browns start to repopulate down here, and then that would be its fundamental niche. So, like these barnacles, closely related species who have evolved to utilize different niches may show greater morphological similarity if their realized niches are allopatric, and fewer morphological similarities if their realized niches are sympatric. So, what this is talking about is that if two closely related species that diverged evolutionarily are found kind of in the same geographical location, it's more likely that they will have more morphological differences rather than two closely related species found at a greater distance. This is called character displacement, when closely related species diverge to a greater extent in sympatric niches rather than allopatric niches. And if you think about that, it kind of makes sense. One example is between these two types of finches. You have a smaller beaked and a larger beaked, right? Larger beaked are these blue line, smaller beaked these tan ones. So, what we have here is a graph of beak depth and percentage of individuals in each size beak depth. So if we find a place where both of these species live together in Santa Maria, we can see that there's a vast range of beak depths. See, vast range. More morphologically different from each other. However, when you find them in two different areas that are separated, you can see how closely these beak depths overlap. So between the two populations that are separated, on average, there's not a huge difference in beak depth. However, when they lived in the same area, there's much greater variation, and that's called character displacement. Morphological differences need to arise more quickly, or rather to a greater extent. Greater variation must occur when they live together in order to partition resources and limit competition, and competition ends up hurting both of them. No competition here, there's really no impetus for variation to occur. Alright, kind of number 2 and 3, we're talking about predation and herbivory. So predation refers to a species interaction where the predator hunts and eats the prey. If the prey is a plant, we also call that interaction herbivory instead. So as we've seen, the predator-prey relationship is important in population dynamics. This is kind of what we went over on Friday with boom bust growth. Predator and prey species often co-evolve a number of traits to remain the dominant hunter or avoid predation. So, for example, cryptic coloration. So, prey sometimes evolve camouflage to hide from their predators. Also, poisonous or unpalatable prey like poison arrow frogs or the the monarch butterfly have aposematic coloration, so bright coloration to kind of warn off predators that they're unpalatable, they're poisonous. And then there's also mimicry that is often used by various prey species to avoid predators. And specific plants might develop toxins or physical barriers like thorns to prevent herbivory, so that form of predation. And predators, on their side, they can also develop physical traits that aid in the capture of prey, so they can be quick, long claws, good eyesight, good hearing, things like that. So here is an example of what is called Mullerian mimicry. Mullerian mimicry. And that is when a non-venomous organism kind of evolves to look like a venomous organism because, or is naturally selected to look like a venomous organism because then this non-venomous organism is often mistook by predators as this venomous organism and in turn won't be eaten or attacked for fear of that snake's venom, even though it is venomless. Number 4, looking at symbiosis. So in these interactions between species, sometimes these interactions happen when these species are in direct contact, close together, and we call those direct relationships that involve direct intimate contact symbiosis. And there's 3 types of symbiotic relationships. There's a mutualistic relationship where both species benefit from that relationship, like this deer and these birds. The birds use the deer for food, eat ticks off the deer, so benefit by gaining food, and the deer gets those pesky ticks off its back. So this is kind of like a plus win-win. On the other side, there is a parasitic relationship where one species benefits and the other is harmed. Think of parasites like tapeworms. They benefit having a place to live, food source. The person infected with the tapeworm is harmed. They get sick, they lose or get weak, they lose a lot of nutrition that way. You can also think of predation as almost a parasitic relationship, positive for the hunter, negative for the hunted. And lastly, there's a commensalistic relationship where benefits one, the other one doesn't really mind. So, for example, these long fishes that are here on the shark kind of attach to the shark, swim around with him and chew up his leftovers. Doesn't really harm the shark. The shark doesn't really get any benefits from these fish being kind of right along with him. So he's not really affected. That's a good example of a commensalistic relationship. So you can use this chart to kind of remember, or help you remember, which relationships are which. Mutualism, plus, help both. Parasitism, help one, hurt the other. Commensalism, help one, no effect on the other. Alright, and lastly, we'll look at facilitation. So a species can have a positive effect on another species without being in direct contact or forming a symbiotic relationship. So symbiosis, remember, direct contact. So same kind of positive benefits without that direct contact, and that's called facilitation. So, for example, Juncus gerardi, which is a salt marsh grass, makes the soil more hospitable for other species in the New England salt marshes, and it does this by preventing salt buildup and oxygen depletion in the soil. So this is the Juncus gerardi. You can see that here in the foreground, and they help other plants become established there by limiting the salt buildup and the oxygen depletion in the soil. And in fact, kind of like this simple chart will show you over 50% more plant species can live in these salt marshy areas with the juncus than without the juncus. So that's an example of a facilitation, facilitatory relationship. That's about it for today. Just let me know if you have any questions.